have to admit something. I'm probably not alone in this, but I have to admit that before this year, I really didn't give much thought to the American Civil Liberties Union. Now, in the last 10 crazy months, I can see how important they really are.
Oh my God.
So, that's why I'm happy to introduce our speaker for tonight. He is the Executive Director of the ACLU of Kansas. He joined the ACLU in January 2015 with more than 15 years of experience in civil liberties, civil rights, and racial justice work. He has worked with some of the globe's leading thinkers, activists, and policymakers to help achieve a just society, one where equal opportunity is not a dream but a reality, where sustainable economic growth is shared by all, and where compassion for the most vulnerable is a priority rather than an afterthought. Please welcome Dr. Micah Kubic.
Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you. Let's try again. So when I extend the greeting, your job is always to return it. So good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Much better. Thank you. So my name is Micah Kubic. I'm the Executive Director of the ACLU of Kansas, and I'm very happy to be here with you this evening. I'm sorry that I cannot attend your Halloween party wearing my Sam Brownback costume. Sweater vest, dour expression on my face, very unhappy.
Halo.
I have a joke about a Chris Kobach costume as well, but I'm not going to make it this evening. So, for those of you who don't know, the ACLU is a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan, non-political organization founded 97 years ago for one reason and one reason only, and that is to defend the Constitution of the United States. To defend the civil liberties and civil rights and freedoms that belong to every single person in this country under the Constitution. And I think it's especially important that we say today every person, because there are some folks who seem to think that the Constitution is only for some people and not for others, or who think that the rights guaranteed by the Constitution apply only to citizens and not to non-citizens. Which is not true. Non-citizens have rights too. It's a different set of rights, but non-citizens still have rights. So we at the ACLU defend the right to free speech, the right to practice your religion in any way you wish, the right to vote, the right to equal protection, the right to due process. We work in a couple ways. We work through litigation, so we sue people a lot, all the time. On any given day, we have about 3,000 lawsuits running all over this country. We've been to the Supreme Court more than any other organization than the federal government, and we have won at the Supreme Court more than any other organization. And just about every major civil liberties or civil rights case that you can imagine since 1919, we have been involved in some way. We work in policy and advocacy. We're at the legislature a lot. We're in city councils and county commissions. And we do a lot of community organizing and public education, too, to make sure that folks know what their rights are and don't always have to rely on a group like the ACLU, but can instead defend themselves in the moment where their rights are being violated. Before I go any further, I have to give this mandatory disclaimer that I have to give every time, which is that my presence here this evening is not an endorsement of the Democratic Party or any of its candidates. I am not here to support any one candidate or party, but rather to do public education. I will speak to any group that asks me, any political party, anytime. I speak to Democrats a lot. I speak to Libertarians a lot. One of these days, I will get an invitation from the Republicans. And when I do, I will gladly accept it, and they will probably throw things at me, but we will all have a wonderful time together. I was going to give you a different speech this evening, because I actually sat down and wrote down some thoughts earlier this week, which I don't normally do. I was going to try out some new material on you, honestly, about the future of democracy and the glories of the Constitution and the wonderfulness of all of the rights that belong to us, and it was going to be a great speech. You were going to love it. It was going to be fantastic. But you're not going to hear that speech tonight, because I was in the car on the way here, and I did something stupid and turned on NPR and listened to the newest outrage, which was that this afternoon at the press conference that he gave, John Kelly, the chief of staff to President Trump, decided that he would only take questions from reporters who personally knew Gold Star families. Any reporter who did not know a Gold Star family personally was not allowed to ask a question of the chief assistant to the President of the United States. This does not suggest a strong embrace of the First Amendment to me. And that just made me think about a song that I like a lot. There's a R&B singer I like, a blues singer named Denise LaSalle. Had one big hit in the 1970s, Trapped by a Thing Called Love. She has another song that this reminded me of, and it's called I'm Tired of Going Through Changes with You. Because that really sums up my attitude to everything that I see on the political horizon right now. I'm tired of going through changes with this man who has total disregard and disrespect for the Constitution. I'm tired of going through changes with this administration that wants to build a wall and deport 12 million people. I'm tired of going through changes with Sam Brownback and his crusade to stop women from making decisions about their own health care. Yes! I'm tired, oh Lord, am I tired of Chris Kobach and his effort to stop citizens from participating in democracy. I am tired of going through changes with these people.
We've had it.
But here's the thing, right? When some people get tired, what they do is sit down and take a nap. They rest. They decide to check out. That's not what we do. I know that's not what we do at the ACLU, and I know it's not what you do in this room either. When we get tired of going through changes, what that means is we get active. Yeah. We get involved. We get on the battlefront to do something about the nonsense. And there's a whole lot of nonsense coming at us today. In every possible respect, there's a whole lot of nonsense. And so while we could go on and on and on about that, there are just three major areas that I want to talk to you about that I think are most urgent for us to get involved in and do something about. The first one that I want to mention is in immigration. Immigration. Is anyone surprised that I would say immigration is an urgent issue? No. That's because this president has made it a priority of his administration to create an environment of fear and harassment and intimidation against immigrants. There's no other way to say that. It is simply true. He is trying to divide and create an environment of fear and harassment. Now, luckily, he hasn't really had the tools to make that environment more than an environment, right? He talks a lot about aggressive enforcement. He's not actually done that by and large. There's been some targeted enforcement actions on a few communities here and there, but they're largely designed to get press attention and make people terrified. That's why nowadays, especially in Kansas, when ICE, the Immigration and Customs folks, want to do an immigration action, they used to go to people's doors, right? They would go to their door and try and snatch them from their homes. Now they wait. They wait until they see the person leave, and they pick them up at the Quick Trip instead. Why? So that everyone else will see it happen and make it seem like it's happening more often than it really is in order to terrify people. That's how you create a police state, by striking fear and terror in people's hearts, before you even have the capacity and the resources to do that. And you see the same thing in their repeated attempts to impose this Muslim ban. They tried once, back in January. They tried in the afternoon. By 6 o'clock that night, we at the ACLU had filed a lawsuit to stop them from imposing the Muslim ban, and a judge ruled in our favor shortly thereafter. Then they went back to the drawing board and came back with a second version. We sued again, and the states sued again, and they stopped it from being implemented. And then they came back now with a third version that you may not have heard. Earlier this week, we also got an injunction to stop from being implemented. They say they're going to go back again and try again. I guarantee you, I don't even have to see what it says. We're going to oppose it again. And the reason for that is they can keep on changing the tool and the technique and the method that they use. They can tweak at the edges all they want, but at the end of the day, in the United States of America, you aren't allowed to discriminate against people based on their race or their ethnicity or their national origin or their religion. And you can dress it up any way you want to. But what they are trying to do, and have admitted they are trying to do, is stop Muslims from coming to the United States. And no amount of tweaking of the language is going to change that basic fact. And that's why we're going to keep on suing them, and we're going to keep on winning in court and in public opinion until kingdom come. The other thing that we can do on immigration in the short term is take steps to protect immigrants in our communities. There's one really good thing that I would like to tell you about happening in Wyandotte County. I know this is Johnson County, but let's leave our parochialism aside for just a moment and embrace our brothers and sisters in Wyandotte County. In Wyandotte County, there are probably up to 30,000 people, that is 1 in 5, who belong to groups that struggle to get government-issued photo ID. Immigrants, senior citizens, foster care youth, folks coming back to the community from prison, they struggle to get government-issued photo ID, which may not seem like a big deal until you think about all the things that you need a photo ID to do, like enroll your children in school, cash a check, fill a prescription, get a job, apply for social services of any kind. Basically, every everyday task that you can think of requires you to produce a government-issued photo ID. And yet there are probably tens of thousands of people in Wyandotte County and other counties in the metro area that don't have access to photo ID because they can't meet the documentation requirements of the state government. Sometimes it's because they are from a foreign country. Sometimes it's because they don't have a birth certificate readily available. There's something we can do about that, which is create a municipal ID program. That's where the city issues a form of photo identification rather than the state. You're allowed to do it. It's perfectly legal. Almost 50 cities around the country have already done it. In New York City, they've issued millions of these things. And so we're trying to create a similar program in Wyandotte County. 15 organizations, including the ACLU, have come together and written a letter to the mayor and the commissioners asking them to do this. There are some folks who are sympathetic on the commission, but as always, they need a little nudge. So to the extent that you know folks in Wyandotte County, please reach out to them and urge them to be in touch with the county commission in order to do municipal ID there. And that's especially important in Wyandotte County because it is the only county in the metropolitan area that has a larger share of immigrants than the nation at large does. And immigrants certainly benefit when they are able to have an ID, feel safe and welcome in the community, participate in services. All of us are safer, stronger, and healthier when that happens. And if we succeed in Wyandotte County, you betcha we come into Johnson County next.
Yeah.
So that's immigration. The second issue that I want to talk to you about is criminal justice reform, the need for smart justice. Because the fact of the matter is that the criminal justice system in Kansas is fundamentally broken. It's not little mistakes. No, it's not little tweaking at the edges. It is fundamentally broken. Our prison population has more than quadrupled over the last 40 years, even though crime is at an all-time low. Crime in Kansas, violent crime, is the lowest it has ever been in the history of them keeping statistics. Nonviolent crime is the lowest it has ever been in the history of them keeping statistics. And yet, the prison population is the largest it has ever been in the history of them keeping statistics. This morning there were 9,983 people in Kansas prisons, which exceeds the capacity of those prisons. Something is fundamentally wrong when crime is going down and the number of incarcerated people is going up. And you see how broken it is when you see all the things that are happening in the prisons. You've heard about the unrest in prisons. You've heard about it in the news, how bad things are. That is not just a product of people being upset that they are in prison to start with. No, it's because there are too many people crowded in too little space, not getting the mental health services that they need, and that produces safety concerns for everyone. That's why we at the ACLU actually are on the same page as the prison guards union. The first time anybody knows this has ever happened in the history of the world, the prison guards union and the ACLU are both saying we need reform immediately in order to send fewer people to prison and make everyone, including the correctional officers themselves, safer. In Kansas, The number one source of admissions to prison is simple, nonviolent drug possession. Almost 30% of all prison admissions are for simple, nonviolent drug possession. And most of the folks who are going to prison for that particular crime are not recreational users. They're folks who have serious diagnosed mental health conditions or behavioral health conditions. And in fact, 35% of the people in Kansas prisons today have a diagnosed mental illness. And it's not one that they got after they got there. No, even the Kansas Department of Corrections says that those 35%, their diagnosis is what caused them to commit the crime that landed them in prison. I don't know about you, I can't speak for you, but I don't think prison is a very good treatment program for mental illness. So we need to create change there. We need to have sentencing reform that defelonizes simple, nonviolent drug possession. Turn those crimes from felonies into misdemeanors. That means that they're still a crime. If you want to criminalize it, it's still a crime. But in Kansas, you don't go to prison for misdemeanors. You only go to prison for felonies. And so we would not be sending folks with mental health issues and behavioral health issues to prison. Instead, they would be convicted of misdemeanors. This isn't a crazy idea because there are 19 other states that have already done it, including Alaska and Utah and Wyoming and South Carolina and Oklahoma. And when you are behind Oklahoma, there is a problem. My family is all from Oklahoma, okay? That's my ancestral homeland, I can say that. So. But when those 19 states have done it, we are behind the curve. It's time we do something about it and defelonize drug crimes. The other thing that we can do that would have immediate impact is start expanding our use of diversion. Diversion is when the prosecutor gives someone a program instead of charging with them with a crime. So sometimes that's treatment, sometimes it's anger management, sometimes it's community service, sometimes it's restitution, but they give them a program. It's especially great for folks who need mental health treatment or behavioral health treatment. Do that rather than convict them of a crime and send them to prison. It's a great program. It's proven successful all over the country. We know that it reduces costs to taxpayers, reduces recidivism, keeps families together, makes communities safer and stronger in the long run. And even though we know all of that, Kansas still uses diversion at half of the national average, 5% instead of 10%. And in fact, there are 23 out of 105 Kansas counties who don't do diversion at all, who last year had precisely 0 cases of diversion. Or there are places like Sedgwick County, or Wichita is, where last year there were nearly 3,000 felony cases and precisely 49 diversions. Right? There are more people in this room tonight than got diversion in Wichita last year. And Wichita sends more people to Kansas prison than any other county in the state. It's not a surprise that the prison population is growing rapidly if we don't take the alternative approaches that exist. So how do we fix that? How do we get more diversion? It's simple. You tell prosecutors you want them to do it.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all. You tell them you want them to do it. Because the prosecutor is the only person who has the authority to do a diversion. They're the only decision maker in that situation at all. People oftentimes think that the judge is the most powerful person in the criminal justice system. Not true. Not true at all. The most powerful person is the prosecutor because they're the ones who make decisions at the front end. They decide who gets charged in the first place, what they get charged with, and what sentence they want to see pursued. The judge can say yay or nay, but only out of the folks who come into the pipeline in the first place. And so we got to tell prosecutors that we want them to make different decisions. Because you know what? The prosecutor is an elected official, just like anybody else. And when they make these decisions, they're not doing some impartial, Lady Justice scales, blindfold sort of thing. No, they're making policy decisions all along the way. So we got to tell prosecutors that we want them to behave differently. Because the truth of the matter is that America has an epidemic of mass incarceration. But if prosecutors wanted to end that mass incarceration, they could do so all by themselves today, immediately. They don't have to wait for the legislature to act. They don't have to wait for judges to act. They don't have to do anything other than make different decisions in who they charge and the sentences that that carries. And so they could end mass incarceration this very moment. But no one pressures them to do that. No one reaches out to them and encourages them to make different decisions. I love to do this experiment every time, so bear with me here. Raise your hands. How many of you have ever contacted your member of Congress? Called, written, anything? Just about everybody. How many of you have contacted your state representative, state senate, state... Most people. How about city council, county commission, local government? Still a lot of people. How many of you have ever contacted your county prosecutor? 3 people. 3 people. 3 people. Right? That tells you something. That tells you why they make decisions the way they do. Because there's not much transparency. There's almost no accountability. In fact, when we do polls at the national level, only about 15% of people know that county prosecutors are elected in the first place. Right? And that's why they make decisions that are diametrically opposite to what we know the public wants. Because here in Kansas, we did a poll last year that showed that 80% of the people in the state wanted prosecutors to do more diversion. And yet when we talk to the prosecutors, what they say is, oh, nobody in my county wants me to do diversion. They want everybody to go to prison for the longest possible period of time. Why? Because they never hear from anybody who believes differently, because nobody contacts them in the first place. So, in order to fix criminal justice, we need sentencing reform, but we also need to reach out to prosecutors and tell them to make different decisions. Treat them like every other elected official under the sun. They are not special little snowflakes who are immune from any sort of accountability from the electorate. Finally, the third issue that I want to talk about, who wants to guess what it is?
Voting rights. Voting.
Right, voting rights. Voting rights. So it always pains me that we have to talk about voting rights at all. Because if you had asked me 15 years ago if there was any work at all to be done on voting rights, I would have told you no, that you were crazy. Because we had basically reached an agreement in this country that people do in fact have the right to vote. We think it's good when people vote. And we actually want to do things to encourage people to vote. But over the last 15 years, there has been a sustained, deeply disingenuous, deeply dishonest campaign to undermine the right to vote in every part of this country. It culminated a few years ago when the Supreme Court ruled that a key portion of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was literally born from the sweat and blood sacrifice of civil rights workers in the South, they ruled that a key part of that law was unconstitutional. They struck it down, and Chief Justice John Roberts in particular said that the Voting Rights Act was no longer necessary because racism was no longer a thing, and so it was irrelevant.
Sure. It's a thing of the past.
Now, mind you, John Roberts used to be an employee in the Department of Justice in the 1980s in the Reagan administration, and when he worked there, he worked on voting rights issues, and he was arguing in 1981 that racism was no longer a thing and that the Voting Rights Act was not relevant and should not be renewed. So I'm not sure that his opinion on this really has any connection to what is actually going on in the real world around us, but is instead a philosophical opposition to the idea that people ought to be allowed to vote. So immediately after they struck down a key part of the Voting Rights Act in 1965, 20 states almost immediately created new barriers to the right of citizens to participate in elections. Immediately. Some of them did it within hours of the court decision coming down. And every last one of those restrictions made it harder for people to register, harder to actually show up and vote, and harder to make their vote count. And I'm sure you will be shocked to learn that every last one of those disproportionately hurt African Americans, Latinos, and senior citizens. In Kansas, we have a special issue with voting rights, and that is for one reason and one reason only. Anyone want to guess this one? Chris Kubic, our Secretary of State. who has made it his life's mission to make it as hard as possible for citizens to participate in elections, and that's only when he's not spending his time trying to make it as hard as possible for immigrants to survive. Secretary Kubic created here in Kansas the single most restrictive law on voter registration that has existed anywhere in the United States since the days of Jim Crow. The single most restrictive law on registration exists here in Kansas, where it has stopped as many as 50,000 people from completing their voter registrations because they don't have a particular piece of paper that Secretary Kubic wants them to have. He created this so-called documentary proof of citizenship requirement. I don't like calling it that because it gives it some sort of dignity that it most decidedly does not have. It's not about proving your citizenship. It's about showing your papers. It's about showing a birth certificate or a passport. And again, going back to the discussion about ID, lots of people don't think about all of the reasons why someone might not be able to easily produce a birth certificate or a passport. Lots of folks aren't going to travel. They're not going to spend $150 to get a passport, right? Lots of folks don't have easy access to a birth certificate. I don't know where mine is. If you ask me now, I'd have to go home and scrounge for hours, and I still probably wouldn't find it. We know the woman who was born at home on a farm in the 1920s by a midwife when they didn't give birth certificates in those circumstances. You only got a birth certificate if you went to the hospital and were born there. She was born. She doesn't have a birth certificate. We represent a guy who was born on a military hospital in Illinois, one that closed in the 1990s when they went through all that base restructuring. Nobody knows what happened to the medical records that were in the basement of that hospital. The VA doesn't know. The Department of Defense doesn't know. Nobody knows. He was born in the United States. He's a citizen. He served in the military himself, and yet does not have a birth certificate. And so Secretary Kubic tried to stop him from registering. Then there are the college students. The single precinct in the entire state that had the most people who were stopped from voting by Secretary Kubic is the precinct smack dab in the center of the campus at KU. Because all those college students, their birth certificate is at home with their parents in the basement somewhere. They don't have it. You add all of that up, and you got tens of thousands of people who are eligible citizens but are not able to register because of this law. That's why we at the ACLU filed not one, not two, not three, but 4 separate lawsuits against Secretary Kubic. And we won not one, not two, not three, but all 4 of them. And as a result, tens of thousands of people were able to register and participate in the elections in November of 2016 and in a few weeks, too. Now, Secretary Kubic is not very excited about this. He is not happy, and he is continuing to appeal and will appeal until the end of time. But we're confident that we will prevail, and thousands of eligible citizens will be able to participate. Because that's really what it ought to be about. It ought to be about us increasing citizen participation in our elections rather than decreasing it.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that Secretary Kubic's policies have actually decreased participation in Kansas elections. You don't have to believe me. The federal government, the General Accountability Office, the government's auditors did a study of Kansas and said that his policies by themselves reduced voter turnout in Kansas by 2%. And that burden fell disproportionately on African Americans and Latinos, to the point that the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights found discriminatory racial intent in the law that he authored and the legislature passed. That's serious stuff when the Commission on Civil Rights is saying there's discriminatory intent in the law. It's done exactly what it was intended to do. Make it harder for citizens to participate, take away people's voice and their vote. So we got a lot of work to do there, not just in court, but in undoing the damage that Secretary Kubic has done. Because even if he had never graced us with his presence, there would still be things that we could do to make it easier for citizens to participate, to actually increase participation in our elections. And so we are working with a coalition of organizations. We launched a coalition a few weeks ago called the Kansas Coalition on Citizen Participation, to advocate for a bill in the legislature that would do 4 things. First of all, it would end Secretary Kobach's failed policies, which are responsible for making it harder for citizens to participate. Second, it would get rid of this ridiculous interstate cross-check system.
Yeah!
Maybe you've heard about this. This is the great big old spreadsheet that he created. It's an Excel spreadsheet, basically, that for every one person it correctly identifies as having double voted in another state, incorrectly identifies 200 people. The error rate is 200 to 1. I guarantee you, in your job, if you were wrong 200 times for every time you were right, you wouldn't be in that job much longer. And yet Secretary Kobach continues to maintain this system, and guess who pays for it? You do. Because nobody else in the country is willing to pay for this mess. Kansas taxpayers pay 100% of the bill to get it wrong 200 times to every time it gets it right. So we got to get rid of cross-check. Third, we need to expand the early voting period.
Yeah.
It's a maximum of 20 days across the state. Some counties do it for 20 days. Some do it for 2 hours. We got to make it more standard. We got to expand the window because guess what? When people have more opportunities to vote and don't have only that Tuesday from 7 to 7, they're much more likely to participate and turnout goes up. So let's make it so that people can participate and make Election Day the last day to vote rather than the only day to vote. And then the fourth and most important thing that we need to do is enact Election Day registration in Kansas. This is where you can come and register to vote at one table and vote at the next table on the same day, up to and including Election Day. They have it in a bunch of states. Everywhere they've tried it, it's resulted in an immediate 11% increase in voter turnout, which has been sustained over time. You know, it's not just a one-time bump. It's sustained over time. Every single election, they have double-digit more turnout than states that don't have Election Day registration. And it's something that benefits everyone. It's not one group or another that turns out more. Every single demographic group turns out more when they have more opportunities to register and vote. Because the voter registration deadline is purely arbitrary. It is the classic example of bureaucratic red tape. It exists for no reason other than the convenience of bureaucrats. And I love bureaucrats, but I find it interesting that the people on the other side who are normally the first ones to howl and caterwaul and gnash their teeth about bureaucracy and red tape at every last moment are the ones who love it so much in this particular case. Why? Because it reduces citizen participation in elections. So, we need to bring Election Day registration to Kansas. We have a bill to do that we're working with legislators to get introduced in the Kansas House and Kansas Senate next year. And I'm going to ask you to do one thing for me. I have brought some postcards with me this evening. Postcards that are addressed to Senator Elaine Bowers, the chair of the Senate Elections Committee. We want to deluge her with postcards, with people letting her know that we want a hearing on this bill. And the reason for that is that the committee is actually pretty good. I know, don't tell everybody, right? But the committee is actually pretty good for us on this particular issue. That if we get a hearing, we think we can pass it out of the committee. Because there are Democrats and moderate Republicans who support citizen participation on that particular committee, and we can get a majority to pass it if we just get Senator Bowers to give it a hearing. So, I brought some postcards. I will ask you to please, if you do nothing else for me ever again in your lives, please fill out these postcards. And if we do that, I think we can actually get something done, and we can increase citizen participation in Kansas elections rather than continuing Secretary Kobach's failed policies. So, those are the three major issues that I would identify for you today. Immigration, smart justice, voting rights. If we do something on those three things, I think that we will have made a difference. We will have made change. There are many more issues that we can tackle, that we are tackling at the ACLU, but those are the three that I think are most urgent today, and the three that, frankly, I'm the most tired of going through changes with these fools. So, thank you very much, and I'd love to answer questions at this time.
If you have the postcards, I can pass them out while we ask you questions. So that if you guys
They are in that round
Where's Senator Bowers from?
Senator Bowers is from Concordia, Kansas. But since she is the chair of the Senate committee, it's fine for folks outside of her district to contact her about it as well, right? So that's.
Thanks.
And I brought some unaddressed ones as well, so if you want to send one to your own representative or senator, please feel free to do that as well. Yes.
Could you give me a good talking point to somebody who, when we talk about voting rights, and so my father says, well, how does it not make sense that you want someone to prove they're a citizen to vote? And when they word it that way, it's kind of hard to argue with. So, do you have a talking point that I can use in response to what's the alternative? You know,
Sure.
I understand the barriers, but what's the alternative to make sure we do have people who are eligible to vote can vote?
Sure. So, first of all, I think it's very important that we start talking about this not in the context of voting rights, although I myself have used that phrase tonight, but citizen participation. Because unfortunately, the term voting rights and the right to vote has become politicized. And there's one particular group that is responsible for that politicization. I don't like it. It doesn't make me happy. But I recognize it as a real thing. And the only way that I think we'll make progress is not to use the term that has been politicized and been given a partisan context. And so instead, when we talk about increasing citizen participation, folks who might not otherwise listen to us are at least open-minded and will listen when it's about increasing citizen participation, right? It goes back to sort of their high school civics and this mindset that we should in fact have a healthy civic society. People are more willing to listen. Doesn't mean they'll agree in the end, but at least you can find some common ground when you talk about increasing citizen participation. And you'll see that's why the coalition is called the Kansas Coalition for Citizen Participation rather than the Kansas Coalition for Voting Rights.
Okay, so they
So that's
have a
point one.
Facebook page. Do you know that group you're talking about?
Citizens Kansas Coalition.
The Kansas Coalition? Yes, we have a website which is letpeoplevoteKansas.org.
Okay,
I
two
know
things.
that
I
one.
want to ask you quickly, what are we doing with these? We're addressing them and we're signing them?
So the ones that are addressed to Senator Bowers, they have a little white tab on them.
Okay.
Just write your name and the city that you are from. If you want to add an extra note to say, I support this, that's great, right? But the main thing is to put your name and the city. You don't have to put your full address, just the city that you are from. And if you give them back to me, we will get them mailed. The ones that don't have a address on, if you want to write your representative's name on it, that's great. If you don't, if you just want to put your name on it, we will address it to a member of the committee for you.
Okay, so fill out, sign, send back in, we'll have them tonight.
So we said, just put our name right here?
Yep. Yeah, just your name and the city that you're from so that they know that you are in fact a real person and it's not just a name. So the second thing, I'll come to you in just a second, sir. The second talking point for folks who are concerned about the so-called proof of citizenship is that in the other 49 states in this country, you have to prove your citizenship. And in Kansas, you had to prove your citizenship before Secretary Kobach's law. Kansas is the only state that creates this particular way of proving your citizenship. In the other 49 states, and in Kansas until 2012, the way that you proved your citizenship was by signing a legal affidavit, where you are guilty of perjury if you sign incorrectly. Because your voter registration form is a legal affidavit that says at the bottom that you are signing this, and that if you sign it in error, you are guilty of perjury and can be prosecuted by our friends, the county prosecutors. So we use affidavits, legal affidavits, where the penalty is being sent to prison for perjury in every other aspect of our lives. Everything else that we do involving government, we say that a legal affidavit where you are guilty of a crime and can be punished is enough. The only place that says that you have to do more than that is Kansas under Chris Kobach. So it's not about not proving citizenship, it's about, that's why we say it really is about documents, about papers, please, not about proving citizenship. Because if it were about proving citizenship, the affidavit would be sufficient. Yes, sir.
Does, related to criminal justice reform, does the ACLU have a position on privatized prisons?
We don't like them.
That's created to keep people incarcerated.
Right.
Right, so we are strongly opposed to private prisons, have opposed them from the beginning when they were first started decades ago, right, when frankly some other folks who are perceived to be on the political left thought they were a good idea and actually supported them because they thought they would be better run than state prisons. That proved to be false. We are lucky, in a sense, in Kansas, in that there is not a private prison in Kansas for state or local prisoners. The only private prison facility in Kansas is in Leavenworth. It's operated by a company that is now called Core Civic. Used to be called CCA, Corrections Corporation of America. They rebranded a few years ago and now have this very happy-looking logo, and it's very, you would think that it was like elections or something. So, and they advertise now at the Phillips 66, advertise to employ people at Core Civic. Core Civic, this facility in Leavenworth exists only as a transfer facility for federal prisoners, mostly who are going to or coming from Fort Leavenworth, the prison there. It does not house any state prisoners or local prisoners. And the one good thing that Sam Brownback has ever done, and don't throw things at me for suggesting that there is such a thing, but the one good thing that Sam Brownback has ever done is said that he strongly opposes private prisons. And in fact, he directed his Department of Corrections not to contract with them, not to engage with them in any way, because he has a moral opposition to private prisons. I criticize him a lot, so when he does something right, it's incumbent on me to tell him that he did something right, so good for him for doing it. Yes, over here and then back here.
Okay, I want you to, because I was at the launch of the Let People Vote campaign, I want you to tell them what it is and about the 50 states, because I think that's just amazing what you guys have undertaken.
Right, so in Lawrence, a few weeks ago, on October 1st, the ACLU launched a national campaign called Let People Vote, which is a 51 jurisdiction campaign to increase citizen participation in elections. The national launch of this initiative, which is really an attempt to rekindle the voting rights movement of the 1960s, was here in Kansas, in Lawrence, which we're partly excited about because it was great, but partly terrible because the reason it was here is because the voting laws here are so terrible, and we are the national poster child for what not to do. But the ACLU has launched a 51 jurisdiction, so all 50 states plus the District of Columbia, to reform election laws in ways that increase participation. And every state has a different campaign, has a different effort that they are undertaking. In some places, it's gerrymandering. In some places, it's combating voter suppression. In some places, it's election reform around election day registration or automated registration. In some places, like Kansas, it's all of those things. And so we launched the 51 jurisdiction campaign, as well as, at the same time, launching the Kansas Coalition for Citizen Participation, which is basically the local effort of that broader effort. Because every single place in this country could do more to make it easier for more people to participate. Even places like California and Oregon that have done a lot lately to make ballot access easier still have even more things that they could do to have people participate. And the reason we know that is because voter turnout in America still sucks.
Yes.
It does. When you compare it to other countries, it's terrible. It's terrible. It's embarrassing. We should be ashamed of ourselves. But we should be ashamed of ourselves not because people don't participate, but because we have created every imaginable barrier to stop them from participating. We should not be surprised that people don't participate when we have sent the message over and over and over and over again that we don't really want them to. And so that's why this 51 state effort, Let People Vote, is so important. We're so excited about it. We had about 800 people in Lawrence on October 1st. 400,000 people watched it live around the country via live stream, and since then 1.4 million people have watched the event that was in Lawrence.
And you can sign up.
That's right.
Participate.
That's right. At vote.peoplepower.org. You can still watch the event. That's still where the video is there if you want to see folks from the ACLU and our partners talk about why Chris Kubic is such a terrible, terrible, terrible Secretary of State.
Oh, it's really entertaining.
There was someone back here and then up here.
And then we're going to run out of time. Second.
I was wondering why there isn't, instead of reacting to all the voter suppression, why there isn't a bigger push to some type of automatic voter registration. We're doing versus social security cards. Why isn't it something bigger than
You turn 18 and you can vote.
So a couple states have now implemented automatic or automated voter registration, where when you turn 18, if you're on the rolls, on the list through the DMV or some other system, you're automatically registered. So this is a complicated thing. It sounds like something that ought to be fantastic, that we ought to all love, right? It's a little more complicated than that. And it's complicated for a couple reasons. First of all, there is actually evidence to suggest that automated or automatic voter registration causes turnout to decrease rather than increase, right? So I'm about increasing voter turnout. I'm about more people exercising their right to vote. And so that's how I look at these sort of initiatives and these reforms, the impact that they will have on voter turnout. And although it is still relatively new, when we look at those two states as well as other countries that do have automatic voter registration, there is some evidence to suggest that when you do that, fewer people participate because it essentially happens without them even realizing it, and that there's something about taking that proactive step that encourages people to participate. So automatic voter registration may actually cause turnout to decline, whereas election day registration causes it to increase by 11%. So that's number one. Number two, about why it's complicated, is because the laws around who is eligible to vote are different than the laws about who is eligible for a driver's license or a non-driver's license or government benefits. And so, unless you do really, 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 really good and intensive and detail-oriented work to make sure that government IT systems talk to each other and control for that sort of stuff, what you wind up with is immigrants on green cards who are here with documents and are eligible for driver's licenses getting inadvertently registered to vote, which then becomes a crime, which makes them eligible for deportation or imprisonment. Or you have folks who have returned from prison, are eligible for a driver's license, but are not yet eligible to vote again. In Kansas, you can eventually vote, but you got to finish your probation or parole, who would then get registered to vote, again, mistakenly, and would be guilty of a felony, which would generally result in 10 years of imprisonment for that person. So, your level of confidence in your government bureaucracy, in your DMV, and in your Secretary of State in particular, have to be very, very, very high in order to pursue automatic voter registration. And I can't speak for you. My level of confidence in Secretary Kubic is not that high. So, that is why at this time, we and our partners have chosen not to pursue automatic voter registration. It's not something that we're saying we're closed off to the possibility ever, right? If more evidence comes out as other states are doing this, that it does boost turnout, I'm on board. And if we can develop some degree of confidence that immigrants and returning citizens in particular won't wind up going to prison for mistakes, then I'm on board.
Okay, so if you like what you've heard, these people are paid and we need to support them. $5 a month, it's a pumpkin latte every month. $5 a month, support the ACLU.
Well, thank
$5
you.
a month.
Thank you very much. And the great thing is that when you do that, you join 30,000 other people across the state of Kansas who are supporters of the ACLU and a nationwide family of 1.6 million people today, which has quadrupled since November 8th, 2016.
Wow.
I think there was one more hand back there and then up here.
Well, I really liked your diversion point number 2. Who's our Johnson County prosecutor and how do we contact him? I think we have a group of activists that know how to make phone calls.
So his name is Steve Howe. H-O-W-E, Steve Howe. And in Johnson County, diversion is used about 5% of the time. So about 5% of felony cases, the ones that matter, because those are the ones that go to prison, 5% of felony cases are diverted, which compares very poorly to the nationwide average of 10%. And Johnson County is one of the bigger places in the state, so if more diversion is used in Johnson County, that has a bigger impact on the prison population and criminal justice statewide. And Steve Howe, the county attorney here in Johnson County, is also a member of the executive committee of the County Prosecutors Association, which every single time when we go with a bill to the state legislature, you can guarantee it, if I'm on this side, they're going to be over there. Show up to oppose anything that any reformer of criminal justice proposes. And it's important that we encourage them to stop doing that, right? To at least be open to reform, and they just are not. So Steve Howe is your guy. You can contact him. He's got a page on the Johnson County government's website, but in the next couple of weeks, in the next couple of weeks, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be unveiling a website and a campaign around this sort of prosecutorial work that will allow you to contact your prosecutor directly, the same way that we set it up for you to contact state representatives and state senators and a governor directly. We're going to be doing that for all 105 county attorneys in the state so that they start hearing from folks.
How many of that 5% are white?
So I'm so glad you asked, because the answer is we don't know, because they refuse to collect the data. And in fact, when we introduced a bill in the legislature that would require them to start collecting data on that, they said no thank you. They said no thank you. What we do know is that on a national basis, African Americans and Latinos are 42% less likely to be given a diversion than are white people for the exact same crime. And what we also know is that if you look at a map of the state of Kansas, Kansas has 105 counties. If you look at the map, there are only a handful of counties that have significant non-white populations. Those are counties that generally don't use diversion very often. The counties in western Kansas, and I'm not talking about Garden City and Dodge City that have large Latino populations now, I'm talking about everywhere else in western Kansas that is largely white, are places that use diversion well above the national average. So there are counties in western Kansas that have only a few thousand people that use diversion in 38% of felonies. Now, it's theoretically possible that every single person who gets a diversion in that county is African American or Latino. I would not bet on it if I were you, but it's at least theoretically possible since we don't have the data. But I have a suspicious mind, right? So when I look at a map and I see that all the places that are relatively diverse use diversion very, very rarely, and places that are not diverse use it a lot, my suspicious mind gets to processing and thinks there might be something to that.
Well, we need to wrap it up, so I want to tell everybody, please let me help me give.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ever had. Tickets. Oh, yeah. We're going to do a little bit more. All right. Okay, so to close, because we want to get you out of here, because the Chiefs are playing, and I have no information, and don't anybody tell me anything.
And was there anyone in here that had a bucket auction item for the Halloween?
Okay, if you have an auction item, please come up and see room. You do have to fill out a form that tells us what the auction item value is. Holly, would you grab the hat? It's on the fountain. We're going to go ahead and pass the hat. If you got any change, this goes directly to our donation fund, the same place you're putting your Halloween ticket money. Don't forget to buy Halloween tickets. 28th, Saturday night. It's going to be great. Who has the square for... We have a square with these guys. Please see them if you need Halloween tickets. Halloween tickets, we're here. We're also still looking for donations for the auction. We are looking for sign-ups for the chili supper. If you have a killer chili and you really think it can win, there will be fabulous prizes.
Tons of food.
Tons of food.
Lots of fun.
Lots of fun. Costume contest, trivia contest that Matthew Calcara is going to. Is he?
My husband.
Your husband is going to.
Matthew Cass.
trivia contest. For those of you who think you can beat me. It's on. Hey, bring it. All right, our next meeting is the third Thursday of the month. We will have our Halloween party. Don't forget, we have the first and second Saturdays, JCDP. Take your agendas. They have all the calendar things on it. Am I missing anything? Please cross-check.
Meeting is adjourned.
Okay, one more thing. LeadCrosscheck.com
What?
website to get more information about crosscheck.
Woo!
LeadCrosscheck.
LeadCrosscheck.com. Okay. Senior committee people, thank you so much. Good night. Go Chiefs!
My presentation. Oh, right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the only
help
extra
me.
thing I'm doing. I'm not doing anything else extra.
Dang it. Whose phone is this?
I left it on the table. I left it.